Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
The Red Apple Media Podcast Network presents This is Protecting America. Now, here's Emmy-winning journalist Rita Cosby.
And welcome to another edition of Protecting America. I'm Rita Cosby. As we are in the throes of the election season, getting out the vote is going to be key this coming election, and that includes Gen Z. New polls show for the very first time in decades, a Republican presidential candidate is leading in the youth vote with former President Donald Trump. And joining us now to discuss this and so much more is Brilyn Hollyhand. He is co-chair of the Republican National Committee Youth Advisory Council. He is also a successful podcast host at the ripe age of 18 years old. And he is the author of an awesome new book. It is called One Generation Away, Why Now is the Time to Restore American Freedom. Brilyn, it's really great to talk to you.
Rita, it's such an honor. You're the best, and it's an incredible opportunity to be able to talk to you today. I really appreciate it.
Why do you think President Trump is winning right now in the youth vote?
I think it's plain and simple, Rita. My generation's waking up. You know, a Republican presidential candidate hasn't won the youth vote since 2003. President Trump was up 8 points this morning. You have been in politics a long time. You know, 8 points is not within the margin of error. That's a major, major, major shift. We're seeing the pendulum has completely moved in the direction of President Trump. Now, why would that be? You know, my generation's looking around. They're seeing what's going on in the country, and it's looking very possible that when my peers and I vote for the first time this November, we will be making history. We're going to be breaking the Democrat stronghold on the youth vote because of the economy. I mean, I think that's the first issue. I mean, Rita, your parents, your grandparents out there, listen to the audience. They all remember graduating from high school. They remember voting for the first time, going off to college, renting their first apartment, even planning to start a family, Rita. Those are pivotal moments in life, and that's the position my peers and I are in right now. We're going into that phase of life under a Biden administration and a Biden economy.
You talk about Biden inflation, Biden economy. Is that the primary issue? A lot of them are also, young people, like you just said, worried about when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the restaurant. Some of them at a very early age thinking, gosh, at some point, if I ever want to buy a home. Is that a lot of topic of discussion, too, amongst your peers?
Absolutely. We spent the past few weeks on the campaign trail, 1 week in Milwaukee, 1 week in Des Moines, 1 week in Dallas, and 1 week in Las Vegas. And I was having conversations everywhere I went, roundtables with youth voters on both sides of the aisle, trying to break through that barrier to have conversations because you know better than anybody, Rita, we need to have conversations to heal America. And so we're talking to these people, and in every single city, I said, guys, listen to this. Tell me what the major issue is for you. Why are you voting in this election? And what's kind of shifting your vote? Why are you maybe voting for Trump because you normally want to support the Republican Party? Every single city, we got the resounding answer, the economy. And I shared those results one night. I was giving a speech in Dallas, and I shared those results on stage. And I had an older gentleman walk up to me afterwards. He said, what are you talking about? Your generation doesn't care about the economy. Your parents pay for everything. And I said, well, for now, for most of us, but a lot of us are heading off to college and we're starting to be independent for the first time. What a difficult time to become independent right now, Rita. It's hard enough for our parents and grandparents to, survive in this economy. It's even harder for us to get our start in this economy. So it's absolutely shifting the pendulum. I cannot tell you the amount of young people that have come up to me and said, Rita, either my parents or my grandparents voted for Biden in 2020, and we cannot make that mistake again.
Does it matter on socioeconomic levels? Does it matter race, color, creed? Or does it seem to be across the board?
So I don't think it matters. I think everybody's affected by this, regardless of your background. And I think people are waking up to that fact. And it's not just the economy. We're hearing other issues as well. I mean, Rita, my generation doesn't want to grow up in a country where sending your political opponent to jail when he's beating you in the polls is the norm. My generation doesn't want to grow up in a country where a senile president continues to get us in more foreign wars, threatening my generation to have to be drafted to serve on the front lines. Rita, my generation doesn't want to grow up in a country where our borders aren't secure and law and order is just the title of that show on TV, not the standard practice in America. We're waking up in droves, and it's not just what we're seeing in conservative bubbles. We're seeing it in national New York Times polling with President Trump winning by 8 points. It's major.
That is big when you think about 8 points. You also see, like in the Trump case, we're seeing, what is it? I see a lot of rappers. He's gaining on the African-American vote. It seems like almost across the board in all the different categories, it seems that he is doing well. So do you think it's sort of natural that it would be in the youth vote?
Yes, absolutely. I can tell you this. I am not aware of all of the plans for the convention next week. I know it's a big and exciting week, but I know there are some plans to have some very high-level, youth figures involved in the convention in some ways. I know some details about some particular rappers have already been kind of leaked to the press, and those are really exciting because that's something that energizes my generation. I mean, Rita, I'll tell you this story. The very first task I had as chairman of the RNC's inaugural Youth Advisory Council, it was last March. It was my spring break. I flew up to D.C. I'm sitting at the Reagan office conference room tables, what the room's called. And I'm sitting there, and the chairwoman of the RNC at the time says, Brilyn, we've got to figure out how to get our primary debates, get young people involved in them. And so the first thing we did was we partnered with Rumble, this YouTube free speech alternative, to kind of stream the debates. Young people aren't watching cable as much as they were, previously before COVID, and so we streamed the debate. And then we actually flew in some young influencers to kind of get people energized, excited. I mean, most of my peers didn't even know a debate was going on, but when they saw it come up on their TikTok, they were excited. We're doing the exact same thing next week in the convention. We're making sure that my peers know that debate's happening, and it's not some boring event. It's a festive, active, all day, every day, all week activity, because we're going to have events going on throughout the day, making sure we're involving young people.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
My name is Lily, and I've had hidradenitis suppurativa, HS, for years. I finally found some relief since taking Cosentyx. Relief means I can show up more.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe hidradenitis suppurativa, HS. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your dermatologist about Cosentyx.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
You know, you talk about the galvanizing. How much is social media playing a role? Rumble, obviously, really popular, and I think I saw you say that when some of the debates ran, it was like 2 million people watching on Rumble. You think about that's an enormous amount. How much is it relating to people where they're at and young people where they're at?
It's major. I mean, the first thing I said in that meeting when I sat down at that table with the chairwoman was, listen, the days of being able to run an ad in the Sunday paper to get your message out to people is over. You've got to modernize. You've got to figure out a way to reach directly to young people. And what better way to do that than through social media? I mean, I'll tell you, Rhea, a conversation I had with President Trump, the most recent conversation I had with him, he was in Montgomery, Alabama. We're talking backstage. He's waving his hands in the air. He's, giving the typical Trump treatment. He said, Brilyn, what can we do to win the youth vote? And I said, Mr. President, it's simple. Get on mainstream social media platforms. True Social is great. We love True Social. It's free, free speech on there. But we also want to make sure that there's a way to reach young people where they are. And that's on Instagram. That's on TikTok. President Trump listens to that advice because he cares about the young perspective and the young opinion. And he has the fastest growing TikTok account in TikTok history. Rita, that's major. President Trump can put out a 15-second video, get it in front of hundreds of millions of people. I mean, that's huge. It's really showing in the polls as well.
You know, you talked about President Trump doing well with the youth vote. Why do you think traditionally in the past, the youth vote always seemed to go to the Democrats? Why do you think in the past they missed the mark?
So I think that the Democrats know two things. One, they know how to bribe voters. They know how to say we're going to cancel your student loans. And they think that they can, kind of dangle free things in front of the eyes of my generation and attempt to win us over. And Rita, I'll admit, in the past, my peers have fallen for it, and it's worked, but it's not going to work this time. Another thing they know how to do is pull on emotions, kind of pull on the heartstrings in what I think is an insincere and disgusting way. But it works, and it has worked in previous elections. And here's something I, encourage my fellow Republicans to do. Pull on emotions in a positive way. Actually, instead of, the Democrats always being doomsday, 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 talk about how we can have a prosperous future for America. What young person doesn't want to grow up in a free America, Rita? We have to start those conversations, and when we turn it to a positive tone, we're on the winning side every time.
You know, you talked about the student loan forgiveness because President Biden famously is doing a lot of that this time. You know, it's funny. I've covered many elections, as you know, Brilyn, and I remember sometimes even in the exit polls, even after Obama, I'd run into somebody and they say, I'm voting for Obama because he's given us, they thought, a free phone. He's given us this. Why do you think it's going to backfire this time? Because President Biden, you could tell, is working hard to try to do the same thing.
Oh, he absolutely is. And like you said, it's their playbook. It's worked for so many years. I'll tell you this, Rita. I think this is what's major. I think my generation looks down on big government. And it used to be something that we weren't familiar with. But COVID absolutely turned us off to big government and showed us how bad big government can be when you give them too much power. I mean, picture this, Rita. Big government kept me out of school for a year and a half. Big government told me that I was an evil, horrible human being if I invited my grandmother over for Thanksgiving dinner. Big government made me strap a diaper to my face every time I walked out of the house, but it was okay if I pulled it up to eat because COVID couldn't attack you while you're eating food. I mean, we saw through this BS, and my generation is absolutely radicalized to the conservative movement because of this. The Democrats actually helped us a lot with their insanity during COVID.
You know, you bring up a great point because your generation is like the ones who went through the COVID generation, clearly. Do you think that COVID, because they really did have to focus on what mattered, it was a wake-up call, and like you said, it may have backfired?
It absolutely was a wake-up call. I mean, Rita, I have friends who missed their high school graduation because big government shut the schools down, shut the graduations down, shut every event down that kept the strip clubs open. And those same people in that same graduating class missed their graduation on some of these Ivy League campuses because of the insane terrorist sympathizing protests we saw just a few weeks ago. It's showing us how bad the radical left is.
You know, you brought up the pro-Palestinian protests, and I was going to hit you right there because there are so many young people that are leading those protests. There's outside agitators, and there seems to be a lot of outside money. How do you think that impacts the vote? And do you think, as a young person there, Brilyn, that it's like, okay, it's a handful of people, or even though it's quite a big group, depending where it is, especially sometimes in places like New York City and a lot of blue cities like that. And we saw, of course, what happened at Columbia, University, where Hamilton Hall, they were all barricaded in. Do you think that young people overall are saying, okay, these are just a group of radicals, and in fact, on July 4th, we're burning the American flag? Or are they having an influence on some people that maybe aren't sure, on the fence, or can be easily influenced?
I think they're influencing people, Rita, but they're influencing them in a negative way. They're scaring them away. I mean, I'll tell you this, for example. I'm sitting right now on a terrace calling you in from downtown Manhattan, and I can give a story from just here in the great state of New York where we saw a few examples in just the past 2 weeks of some of these elections going on, these primaries, where the terrorist sympathizing members of Congress, some of the members of the squad, got voted out of office because, again, they were terrorist sympathizers. They got too radical for their own radical party. People are waking up on both sides of the aisle, and this is absolutely going to be a major shift.
You also brought up the debate. You brought up sort of the senility, the cognitive decline that everyone's talking about with our current commander-in-chief. Did you get a reaction from young people after the debate? It seemed that everybody saw that split screen of, President Biden on one side looking dazed and confused at certain points, for sure, and then a very much more vibrant President Trump on the other side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Unfortunately, I did get that split screen, and it's a split screen I'll never be able to get out of my head because my peers and I were I was at a church youth camp that night, and we sat together and watched it on the big screen. And I my thoughts, but everybody around me agreed. We saw the man that has had the nuclear codes for the past 3 years, Rita, and I was absolutely terrified that senile man has been somehow running the country. We really know it's his staff that's running it. There's his staff and family that's convincing him to stay on the ticket, that's keeping him in. We're realizing right now how sad it is, truly, that this elder abuse is happening on the global stage. I mean, my generation isn't ageist. This isn't an age issue. This is a cognitive ability issue. First of all, we saw on the debate stage how sharp as attack President Trump was. The DNC, the left-wing media, and the White House has been convincing us for the past, not convincing us, but attempting to tell us for the past 3 years that Biden's sharp as attack. It was very clear that night that the only person sharp on the attack that stage was Donald J. Trump. And, you know him well. I know him well. He's like that behind the scenes, too. It's not just in front of the cameras. I'm actually terrified to see what Biden's like, what state he's in when the cameras are off, if he was that scary when the cameras are on, Rita.
What do they think of Kamala Harris, you and your peers?
She's crazy. She's absolutely crazy, and people agree. I have so many people sending me reels and TikToks of her funny gasp, of her cackling laugh, of the saying, "Oh, what did you do? Did you fall out of a coconut tree?" The crazy things that she says over and over again. Remember, we have to be unburdened by what has been, whatever that means. Kamala always has these random things. She's in cognitive decline as well, it appears, or she's just a little Looney Tunes. And my peers, again, see through that and see through the inauthenticity with her.
Your book, I think, has a really important message. One generation away, why now is the time to restore American freedom. Explain why you think it's important. Because what I love also about your book, first of all, the who's who is endorsing it. I love that at your age, it's incredible. And also, it's a book for students. It's a book for parents, too. It's a book for other folks, too, as well.
Absolutely. I'll start with this, Rita. This book is 7 years in the making. This is 7 years of my, since the age of 11, traveling the country, talking with as many Americans as I could, but more importantly, listening to even more of them, Rita. And what I've heard time and time again, I know it's the same thing that you hear, is that people on both sides of the aisle, on all spectrums of age, constantly do not have hope in the future of America. And that's absolutely something we're trying to instill in this book. Rita, constantly I tell my peers when I finish campus speeches that my hope is not in any D.C. bureaucrat, it's in Jesus Christ alone. And that's absolutely the message we need to be getting out there. It's absolutely the message that this book's point is. And you mentioned that it's for several people groups. That's why I think this book's unique. That's why I think it's selling so well. We debuted this morning at number 3 on the Amazon bestsellers list. Let me just have a point of privilege here, Rita. It absolutely shows you that the American dream is alive and well when an 18-year-old can be a published author sitting at number 3 on the Amazon bestsellers list. That's a testament to the hardworking men and women out there that want to have hope, that want to start the hope in their home. And that's where it does start. So you're exactly right. The book's for my peers out there who want to get involved, that want to, not necessarily have a career in politics, but at least want to pay attention to what's going on because they're scared, they're frightened of our future. It's also for parents. Parents out there who look out at this country, that see the indoctrination that's going on, pre-K all the way to higher ed. It's terrifying to them and they want to change course. And finally, it's for grandparents. Grandparents who sit and look out at America's skyline like I'm doing right this very moment and do not recognize this country as the same country they grew up in and raised their children in, and they want to change that and want to flip the script. Rita, it's absolutely a bestseller simply because of that. Not because of anything I've done, but because we can get the message out, and it's a message people want to hear right now.
Well, I'm going to brag about you because I think it is a lot of what you have done, my friend, because you are a rock star. I love the story of how you got involved, and I want to have you share it with everybody, too, because as you brought up at the wise old age of 11, you got interested in politics. Talk about how that began, how you got so galvanized back then.
Yeah, absolutely. So I vividly remember I was in third grade. I was 11 years old. I was walking through my living room, probably playing some game outside in the neighborhood or doing something that typical third graders do. And I happened to walk through the living room, and my parents, my mom's a school teacher, dad's in construction, not really the people that are politically in tune, but just happened to be watching the news that night. And they had on the Trump Hillary debates. And I was like, this is fascinating. This man will say whatever's on his mind. He's not using a political script. And he's actually sounding like a typical American. He's fighting like a typical American. He's not a poised politician. He's a man of the people. And I can tell you, and again, President Trump very well, he is a man of the people. So he kind of inspired me to get started, get involved. And that was the age of 11. Since then, I've spoken out. And for a while, I was interested but wasn't getting involved. I was like, when I'm older, I'll get involved. But don't worry. Right now, my parents, my grandparents have it. Those generations, they're going to save America. I don't need to save it. Rita, they didn't save America. And so I stepped up at the age of 11, got involved. We've done it for 7 years. And again, we're seeing a major shift because it's clearly working, because President Trump's winning by 8 points. It's not just me that's, frustrated with the state of America. It's all of my peers.
You brought up Trump. Was there something about that moment? Like you said, do you think if you had been watching a debate with maybe others in the past, you might not have been galvanized? Or was there something about him that captivated you?
It absolutely was something about him. And I've told him this a few times. It was that moment where, and a friend of both of ours, Greg Kelly, just played it for me a moment ago, where he said, because you'd be in jail, to Hillary Clinton. And I was like, oh, my goodness, no other politician would say this. Like, that wasn't on the cue cards their consultant handed them when they went out there. But Trump didn't care. Trump was a typical man of the people who wanted to push back against the D.C. elites. And let me say this real quick, Rita. This is something that really got me laughing yesterday. Biden's in such a cognitive decline that he had a major gaffe yesterday that nobody's even talking about. I think this is pretty funny. Speaking of elites here, he's obviously hasn't had too good of a media week, and his team attempted to have a recovery interview. He called in to a very DNC-friendly, washed-up morning show and said, again, this is a safe, supposed to be a recovery interview, and said he dug himself a bigger hole. He said he's not getting out of the race, and it's the DNC elites that are attempting to kick him off the ballot. Rita, you know as well as I have, Joe Biden has been in Washington, D.C. for 45 years. 45 years. He's the definition of a DNC elite, Rita. What is he talking about? I mean, we're so fed up with out-of-touch politicians that Donald Trump was a breath of fresh air for us.
Yeah, and you're seeing sort of the spin machine in full cycle. Do you realize also, as a young person, and I said this to you before we even started recording, any other election cycle may be boring after this, because this is just unbelievable. As someone who's covered so many different elections, do you realize that this is really such a moment in history? And between what's going to happen with President Biden, of course, all the polls and the momentum right now, clearly it looks like very much on President Trump's side. I think it's his to lose. I think he really, really is, skyrocketing through all the polls. Do you realize just how incredible this moment is?
Absolutely, I do. And I was just telling my publicist on an elevator a moment ago, every day I think it's at its peak crazy. And then I refresh my email and I get another news blast of it getting even crazier. I mean, we just talked about it, but I got involved in politics in the 2016 cycle because I thought our country was too divided. I was like, this is as bad as it gets. We've got to turn this around before it gets any worse. And in the past 8 years, Rita, we've unfortunately gotten even more divided. It's so sad. It's so frustrating. But I absolutely think it's up to the younger generation to start having conversations on both sides of the aisle. And if we sit down at the table, talk it out, and leave still disagreeing, at least we had the conversation. That's better than where we are at right now as a country. Yeah,
absolutely, for the good of the country. And I've got to ask you the $64 million question. What's ahead for Brilyn Hollyhand?
We get that question a lot. I'll say,
as a member of the Brilyn Hollyhand fan club, what's ahead for you?
Yeah, so I'll give you this, Rita. I have not necessarily interested in political office right now. That could change. I just feel like that's not necessarily God's calling. Right now, I'm enjoying my time as being more on the commentary side, being able to talk to people and inform them and have conversations in this advisory role with the RNC. That's my focus right now. That's my goal. Not, closing the door on political office, but I think it's too messy, too dirty, and it would take a lot to get me in there.
Well, who knows? If you are ever in the race, the American public would be lucky to have you. It's really great to talk with you. Everybody be sure to subscribe and share to this podcast and get Brilyn's awesome new book. It's One Generation Away, Why Now is the Time to Restore American Freedom. Congrats. I'm so proud of you, Brilyn.
Thank you so much, Rita. You're such a good friend, such a good supporter, and we really, really appreciate you.
And everybody, I'll be back soon with another great edition of Protecting America. And of course, you can catch me every weeknight, 10 p.m. to midnight on the legendary WABC Radio. This is Rita Cosby, and thanks for all you do to protect America.